Tonight's podcast is 7 ways why liberating lingo bypasses the mind. Because everything that comes out of the mind is from yesterday. Liberating lingo bypasses the mind because the mind is a museum of yesterday, and this language refuses to live behind the glass. The mind speaks in recycled labels, inherited definitions, and pre-approved inherited definitions and pre-approved narratives that keep you obedient to the old versions of yourself. Liberating lingo doesn't negotiate with that architecture. It rises above it. It speaks in frequency, never memory. It transmits from awareness, never analysis. It cuts through the mind's commentary like lightning through desert heat, unveiling clarity the intellect could never manufacture. As a liberating lingo boldly dissolves inherited rhetoric, breaks the chokehold of political correctness, and awakens the instinctive, intuitive wisdom buried beneath years of educational conditioning. When liberating lingo moves through you, expression stops being a performance and becomes a pulse. Insight stops being a thought and becomes a revelation. And that's something, if you use revelations over thoughts, it bypasses that thinking memory mind. You stop speaking from the mind you were taught to have and start expressing from your sovereign savvy you were born with. Liberating lingo speaks in frequency, never logic, and the mind can never decode frequencies. The mind wants grammar, structure, and certainty. Liberating lingo speaks in pulse, presence, and revelation. It slips past the mind filters because it doesn't argue with thought. It out vibrates it. That's why inspiration hits instantly. The mind never had time to interfere with inspiration. Liberating lingo disrupts the ego's narrative by refusing to use the ego's vocabulary. I use my ego's vocabulary. I catch it now, but it's still there. The ego talks in fear, memory, and commentary. Liberating lingo talks in sovereignty, clarity, and possibility. When the language changes, the identity holding the language collapses. That collapse is the spark that energizes inspiration. Liberating lingo activates awareness, directly bypassing the museum of mental exhibits. The mind recycles, liberating lingo unveils. It doesn't trigger old reflexes, it awakens fresh perception prowess. That's why inspiration feels electric. It's never coming from thought, it's coming from unfiltered awareness. Why liberating lingo dissolves the mind bind and unwinds energetic liberation to flow from within you. Liberating lingo breaks the mind's grip by refusing to speak in the mind's limitations. The mind binds you with definitions, labels, and commentary. Mine has a lot of commentary sometimes, but it's realizing all it is commentary. Liberating lingo uses frequency instead of vocabulary, so the mind can never grab it, cage it, or categorize it. When the mind can never hold the language, the bind dissolves and flows, and flow takes over. Liberating lingo activates awareness, directly bypassing the ego's entire narrative system. The ego survives through story and memory and emotional reenactment, emotional snapshots. Liberating lingo never feeds the story, it interrupts it. That interruption is the spark that unwinds energetic liberation, letting inspiration rise without the mind's interference. Liberating lingo turns breath into guidance, letting flow instead of thought. The mind tries to control the rhythm. Liberating lingo lets breath become the rhythm, which instantly shifts you from thinking to sensing, from reacting to receiving. Flow appears the moment you stop translating life through the mind and start broadcasting it through awareness. Why change, heal, create, transformation are cognitive recollection rhetoric, because they recycle the past instead of releasing it. Their upgrades to the cage never exist from it. Most change in healing frameworks drag you back into the memories you're trying to rise out of. They make you revisit, retell, re-identify the wound, which means the past stays in charge and the mind stays the narrator. It's never liberation. That's never liberation. That's emotional reenactment dressed up as progress. I've had that in my life. And you can really, once you open up to the liberating lingo, like expand instead of change, you can really feel the flow, because they rely on the mind's archives, never awareness. They're built from yesterday's vocabulary. Change, heal, create, transformation all assume the mind knows what freedom looks like. But the mind only understands and knows what it already has stored. So these concepts become cognitive recollection loops, the mind trying to improve itself using the same material that created the limitation. Using the same stuff that created the limitation. Have you ever caught that in yourself? I have. And until I got out of the change, heal, create thinking, I used to have that a lot. It's a museum, your mind's museum, rearranging its exhibits and calling it evolution, because they keep you performing a self that doesn't exist anymore. They reinforce identity instead of dissolving it. Transformation rhetoric assumes there's a you that needs fixing, shaping, or upgrading, but that you is just a bundle of conditioned memories. Liberation doesn't transform, it rises of sovereign valor. When you stop trying to change the character and start stepping out of the old scripts, old cognitive illusions, all the illusions collapse and you let go of that pollution inside you. Why indoctrinated education language is unknowingly stifling and limiting. Because indoctrinated language trains you to speak in conclusions instead of curiosity, killing insight before it can breathe. School language is built on correctness, never clarity. It forces you into approved vocabulary, which locks you into approved thinking. When the language is preloaded, the mind becomes pre-limited. Mine does. When the language is preloaded, the mind becomes pre-limited. Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me. You can never discover new worlds by speaking old words. That's a true statement. Because it conditions you to communicate from memory, never awareness, turning expression into repetition. Indoctrinated language is built from definitions, labels, and frameworks, all of which come from the past. So every time you use it, you're not expressing yourself. You're recycling the system. It stifles originality because it forces you to speak from what you've been taught, never what you're sensing. Because it makes you fluent in obedience and illiterate in liberation. The language of education is designed to keep you accurate, compliant, and predictable. The liberating lingo opens your sovereign awareness and uncontainable wisdom. Indoctrinated language limits you because it teaches you how to sound correct, never to sound alive. Why appreciation rises you into flowing liberation. Appreciation melts the mind's grip. Let your awareness move like water instead of machinery. The mind wants you to tighten, judge, and control. Appreciation loosens, softens, and opens the moment you appreciate. Your system rises from contraction to flow, and liberation becomes natural currents instead of mental projects. A projection flips you from scarcity script to abundance signal and follows only lives in abundance. Scarcity freezes you, abundance frees you. Appreciation is the frequency that tells your nervous system we're safe, we're open, and we're available. And the second you're available, flow rushes in like desert rain. Appreciation aligns you with your presence, and your presence is the only place liberation actually can move and groove you forward. Flow never happens in memory. Flow never happens in anticipation. Flow occurs in the now, and appreciation drops you straight into the now. From there, inspiration doesn't trickle, it pours. Liberation doesn't visit, it lives within you. Why forgiveness stifles you back into your past. Forgiveness forces you to reopen the archives, dragging you into the very story you're trying to outgrow. To forgive, you must remember. You must revisit the wound and the character you played. That means you assigned yourself to that. That ritual pulls you straight back into the museum of yesterday, locking you into the identity you're trying to shed. Forgiveness becomes a spiritualized replay button. Forgiveness keeps the wound alive by making it the center of your emotional narrative. Forgiveness requires a villain, a victim, and a version of you that no longer exists. It keeps the wound relevant. It keeps the story active. It keeps the ego in charge instead of dissolving the past. Forgiveness preserves it like emotional taxidermy, dressed up as healing. Forgiveness traps you in moral bookkeeping. Appreciation liberates you into present moment sovereignty. Forgiveness says, let me evaluate the past again. Appreciation says, I rise beyond it. Forgiveness ties you into the old frequency. Appreciation lifts you into the fresh one. Forgiveness loops you. Liberation moves and grooves you. Why expand, energize, enterprise, and experience, bypass the mind, unleash fresh foresight. Because expansion happens through awareness, never analysis. And the mind can never track what it didn't create. The mind only understands what it is, what it has archived. Expand moves in unmapped territory, so the mind gets left behind while awareness steps forward. Fresh foresight appears the moment you stop asking the mind for permission to evolve, because energizing shifts your power source from thought to presence, and presence generates clarity the mind can never manufacture. Thought recycles, presence unveils. As you energize, you stop pulling energy from memory and start feeling it flow to you from the present moment. That switch bypasses the mind's commentary and ignites insight that feels fresh because it is fresh. Because enterprise and experience operate as direct perceptions, never mental interruptions. Enterprise is the inner entrepreneur of awareness. It builds from intuition, never instruction. Experience is the raw, unfiltered encounter with now. Together they bypass the mind's museum and open a channel where fresh foresight flows without the mind's edits, doubts, or delays. Why thinking, knowing, learning, and knowledge and thoughts keep you stuck in old scripts. Because the mind can only recycle what it already stored. It can never generate anything fresh. Thinking is a remix of memory. Knowing is a museum of exhibits. Learning is downloading someone else's conclusions. Knowledge is archived information pretending to be truth. Thoughts are reruns of yesterday's wiring. When you operate from these, you're never evolving, you're experiencing. Mind keeps you in old scripts because it only has access to old material. Because the mind protects identity, never possibility. And identity is built from your past. Thinking reinforces who you were. Knowing reinforces who you believed you were. Learning reinforces who the system trained you to be. Knowledge reinforces the boundaries of your old world views. Thoughts reinforce emotional patterns you've rehearsed. The mind's job is to maintain continuity, never liberation. So it keeps you loyal to the character you've outgrown. Yeah, it has me. But more than rise of liberation, I'd rise out of it. Because the mind filters reality through fear, memory, and meaning, blocking the fresh signals of awareness. Thinking edits, knowing limits, learning conditions, knowledge confines, thoughts distort. All of them act as translators, and translators always change the message. Awareness is the only thing that receives life directly. When you rely on the mind, you're living through interpretation instead of revelation, stuck in the rerun instead of the real time broadcast. Why thinking, knowing, and learning? Why thinking, knowing, learning, knowledge, thoughts stop listening, questions, intuition, and inspiration? Because the mind answers before awareness can hear. That's why I get this way. Killing listening at the doorway. Thinking rushes to interpret. Knowing rushes to conclude. Learning rushes to categorize. Knowledge rushes to confirm. Thoughts rush to narrate. All of them interpret the raw signal before it even reaches you. Listening requires openness. The mind demands closure. So the moment the mind jumps in, listening shuts down and awareness gets muted. That's happened a lot in my life, but now I'm liberating myself from it. Because the mind protects what it already believes, making questions feel like unnecessary or threatening. Thinking wants to be right. Knowing wants to stay right. Learning wants to prove it and learn correctly. Knowledge wants to defend its archives. Thoughts want to reinforce the identity they've built. Questions threaten all of that. So the mind blocks curiosity to preserve its own authority, trapping you in yesterday's conclusions. That's happened to me. Because intuition, inspiration come from presence, and the mind lives in in memory. Intuition rises from the now, inspiration rises from the unknown, and the mind only operates from the past. So when you rely on thinking, knowing, learning, knowledge, and thoughts, you're turning into an old broadcast, while intuition, inspiration are transmitting on a live frequency. The mind can never access that channel because it's too busy replaying what it already stored. Why inspiration, awakened aware, comprehension, wisdom, revelation rise you into your life of leisure. Because inspiration moves from effort to alignment of the are the true source of leisure. Effort is the mind grinding, inspiration is awareness guiding. When you're inspired, you stop forcing life and start flowing with it. Leisure is never laziness. It's a natural state that appears when you stop when you're no longer fighting your own clarity. Inspiration turns life from labor into glide. Because awakened and aware comprehension dissolves resistance, and resistance is the only thing that makes life feel hard. I'm really good at that. It's leaving, but I can make life feel hard. The mind complicates, awareness simplifies. When you comprehend from awakened presence, you stop wrestling with what is and start flowing with it. The moment resistance drops, life becomes spacious, fluid, and easy driven. Leisure, leisure rises because nothing inside you is pushing against life anymore. Because wisdom and revelations upgrade your operating system, freeing you from the grind-based identity we all inherited. That comes from our parents, our ancestors. Wisdom doesn't add more to your mind. It removes what never belonged. Revelations don't never teach you. They unveil you. When you live from revelation instead of repetition, you stop chasing survival and instantly embody sovereignty. Leisure becomes your baseline because you stop living as the overworked character the world scripted for you. Why inspiration awakened aware comprehension revelations awaken energetic liberation, energized listening, and maverick questions, and hearken wisdom. Because inspiration cracks the mind's shell, letting energetic liberation surge through the space the mind uses to occupy. Inspiration doesn't come from thought. It rises from the field beyond your thoughts. The moment inspiration hits, the mind's grip loosens and your inner voltage rises. The rising is energetic liberation. The moment your system stops obeying old scripts and starts moving from raw, sovereign clarity. Because awakened and aware comprehension shifts you from hearing the words to hearing authenticity. Activating energized listening, maverick questions, awakened comprehension isn't mental perception. It isn't mental, it's perceptional. It lets you hear beneath the noise, beneath the narrative, beneath the conditioning from that depth. Energized listening turns on your maverick questions, ignite you to stop asking from intellect and start asking from instinct, breaking open doorways the mind never knew existed. Because wisdom and revelations bypass the mind's archives, awaken the hearkened wisdom, the intelligence that listens before thought. Wisdom is the acumen that listens before thought. Wisdom never comes from learning. It comes from witnessing. Revelations don't come from knowledge. They come from direct awareness. When revelation hits, hearken wisdom awakens. The ancient inner acumen that hearkens novelty without distortion. From there, liberation is never a concept, it's a current of celebrations. I want to thank you. I'm Robert Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom. We'll be here Thursday night, and I ain't sure what it's going to be. The presentation's going to be. So anyway, enjoy your day.